I'm middle-aged, earning a middling salary writing travel books and teaching geography at Oxford University. My life is extremely comfortable, or at least it was. It all changed when I foolishly decided to write a book about what life is like in the hottest, coldest, wettest and driest inhabited places on Earth. It was the toughest year of my life, but it wasn't enough for my publisher. The places I went to were all permanently inhabited. She argued that there must be nastier places on Earth, even if humans couldn't live there all the time. She challenged me to go and find them. The nomads of the Sahara say that Allah removed all surplus human and animal life from the desert so that there might be one place for him to walk in peace. And this is why the Great Sahara is called the Garden of Allah. It's the biggest desert on Earth, 9 million square kilometers of rock, scrub and sand, filling the northern third of the African continent. I've always loved deserts. But where I'm heading is a desert with a terrifying reputation. It's a part of the Sahara called the Tenere. The word, according to the locals, means simply nothing, or empty. The only nomads who regularly cross this huge sand sea are the little-known Tubu people, and remarkably it's often the women of this small nomadic tribe who lead the caravans. My aim was to discover how the Tubu women survived their journey across this fearful void. I was hoping for a gentle introduction to Niger and the desert in the ancient town of Agadez. But it was not to be. The Sahara is the greatest source of dust in the world, and most of it seemed to be in the air of Agadez.
So this is it. It's still first day in Agadez, and it's quite a serious dust storm. And it's starting to rain hard. It must be a thunderstorm. The way they happen is that instead of raining to begin with, all the rain evaporates and it churns up this vast amount of sand into the atmosphere. And now the rain's coming, and actually it's going to wash it away. But I saw plastic bags almost as high as the minaret tower over there, with really strong wind for a while. It's slight, it's still as strong. And the goats don't like it at all. Everyone is ducking inside, which is the sensible thing to do. But I'm actually quite excited because this really does mean I'm here, and this is it. And I hope I get one of these in the Tenere Desert. But even if I don't, this is a good start.
The storm was fierce, but mercifully short. It was the tail end of the rainy season in Niger. These fleeting showers offer welcome relief from the blistering temperatures. 1/6 of the population of Niger are nomads, and Agadez has for centuries been a crossroads on the trans-Saharan trading routes. I'd come here to meet up with Layla, a Tuareg woman who had agreed to help me prepare for my journey across the Tenere. But a message reached me. Change of plan. She wanted me to come to a place called Tafadek for a bath. 4/5 of Niger is desert, but Agadez lies on the edge of an area called the Sahel, which is the Arabic word for shore. It is the shore at the edge of a sea of sand. The Sahel covers about 20% of Africa's land surface and separates the arid north from the savanna of the south. But this was nothing compared to what lay ahead of me in the Tenere. In Tafadek, I finally got to meet Layla, who seemed to think that a bath was a vital initiation for my journey. Tafadek, it turned out, was a famous hot spring, and Layla told me that nomads came here to prepare for long and dangerous journeys into the desert. The prescription was total immersion in the curative and extremely hot water. And how hot is it?
Very hot.
And I've got to completely immerse
You have to go
myself.
inside.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's really hot.
Sounds more like sort of pain than pleasure.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And you still expect me to do it?
Yeah, we're gonna push you, you know.
Yeah? He's going to
Yeah,
help.
he said he's gonna help. Yeah.
Oh, merci. Merci très bien. Layla said that the Tuareg believed in fighting fire with fire. The scaldingly hot water fortified both mind and body for the ferocious heat of the desert. Ça va, monsieur? I asked him how he was, hoping for reassurance. Not good, he replied. But it was my turn next, and there was no turning back. Once you're in, it's getting in. Wow. Okay. Attends. Yeah. Outside, outside. It's getting in. Surprisingly, I rather enjoyed what was to be my last bath for quite some time. The immersion had turned me a fetching shade of lobster, but I would have to wait to see if it had given me the stamina of the desert nomad. If I was going to survive a journey across the Tenere, I needed to learn how to travel like a nomad. Layla told me how tough life was in the desert, and that the nomad's best friend is the camel. It is transport, food source, and currency. She was taking me to a Tuareg encampment, where she'd teach me about these versatile ships of the desert. She had learnt the hard way. Her family had been nomads until the great drought of the 1970s had killed off their camels, and they'd had to move to the city. Next morning, it was straight down to business. How to ride a camel, lesson 1. Edua, my teacher, looked a little intimidating in his shades, but Layla was on hand to offer reassurance and to do some backseat driving.
On top. Be careful.
Okay, I'm there.
Don't fall, Nick. No, the down part. You have to hold the down part, not
The
top.
down part.
Yeah. And you know something about the camels?
What?
The white one is supposed to be the prettiest, you know, the elegance.
And this is pretty white.
And the red one supposed to be the really intelligent. And the black and white supposed to be the really strongest.
How many gears does it have?
You push your feet a little bit, you know, to make the camel go.
Just like a motor car then.
Yeah.
Very responsive.
You know, encourage him, say it's good, you're doing good.
Yeah, you're doing beautifully, baby. Come on. Come on.
Walking was fine, but once my foot hit the accelerator, it was an altogether less comfortable experience.
It's hard work on your masculinity.
Woo! Go ahead, Nick, faster!
Faster seemed like a really bad idea. But as my lesson was ending, I noticed an increase in camel traffic passing through the neighbourhood. I asked Layla if she knew why. A race, she said, was happening that very afternoon. The Tuareg love to race camels and take it very seriously indeed. As it turned out, my teachers had decided to drop me in at the deep end. With only a few days to prepare for my treacherous desert crossing, they thought that testing my skill and bravery in a race was the way to go. But first, I had to meet the competition.
One of the best riders.
Very pleased to meet you. Now, are you going to be 1, 2, or 3?
He said he would like to be the first one, and he will.
And he will too. Well, best of luck. Very good luck. And how do you rate your chances, Mr. Abdullah?
He said the first one.
Oh, you're going to be first as well? Well, there's another guy over there who might well disagree with you.
How about you?
Oh, I'm going to be first also. The first Englishman.
I was hoping to terrify them with my confidence, but I wasn't sure that it was working. So it's about an hour before I have to go to the race now, and I'm still getting butterflies, I have to say. I mean, I enjoyed this morning, and I was quite pleased with my performance, other than getting an extremely sore bum, and I can't actually sit down now, or at least I'm putting off sitting down right till the end. And the prospect of 3 kilometres on one of those saddles is not a very attractive one.
Careful. Are you ready, Nick?
As ready as I'll ever be, I think, Lola.
That's good. You will be the first one, I'm sure of it.
I think you might have a little too much confidence in me, but I'll see what I can do. Okay, I guess we're more or less ready.
Yeah.
The tension was building. Before every race, they hold a tam-tam, which was a chance for the competitors to show off to the girls. I was determined not to let Layla down, but my start left a lot to be desired. Edua had failed to tell me that the camel's top gear was actually a terrifying canter. If trotting was hard on the bum, the canter broke a new pain barrier. Eventually, I decided to ignore Edua's frantic encouragement, and in order to safeguard the future of the Middleton line, I resorted to a dignified trot. The race was won by the scarily young-looking camel jockey I'd met earlier. The medal ceremony involved both camel and rider receiving the adoration of the crowd in equal measure.
I made it!
No, you made it!
I can't believe it! I made it!
You are really great.
Bien fait, monsieur.
Félicitations.
You were right. You did come first. And were you afraid of the English threat?
Of course he said, yeah, I said he was afraid that you will come, you know.
Yeah, right at the last minute.
Run fast.
I was trying to time it, but I didn't quite get my timing right. And very difficult on your bottom. Yeah? Really difficult, yeah.
Despite the bolts of pain shooting up and down my back, I'd survived the sprint and felt quietly confident about the marathon across the Tenere that lay ahead. Another day dawned in the desert, and I was beginning to live more like a nomad, making my bed on the dry, baked earth. But before heading into the Tenere, I needed to find out more about how the nomads survive in this brutal environment. The average daily temperature in Niger is more than 45 degrees Celsius in the hottest months of the year. Air temperatures in the desert can top 50, making sand and rocks hot enough to burn skin. For most of the year, the nomadic people tend to live in the wetter south of the country. But after the annual rains, they move north in search of fresh pasture for their herds. Whole families carrying all their worldly goods can be seen zigzagging between the newly formed seasonal watering holes. But it's not just fresh pasture which draws them northwards. As animals and humans sweat to keep cool in the blistering heat, they don't just lose water, they also lose salt. Humans need 5 to 10 grams of salt a day for mere survival. Larger animals even more. Which is why for centuries the town of Tegidun Tessent has been a crucial staging post for nomads. The water here is salty, the earth is salty, even the grass is salty. It was here that I met up with Boubacar, who, like Layla, is now a city dweller, but as a child had come here every year with his parents and their herd.
What were you doing here then?
Well, we were moving here from south, like 300 kilometers away with my family.
Yeah.
Coming here for grazing and salt water.
Salt water?
Yeah. In Tegidun Tessent is renowned for its salty water and rich minerals in forage.
Which is really good for the animals.
Yeah.
The people who live here all year round scrape a meagre existence by selling salt to the nomads who pass through. They harvest this salt with a technique perfected over centuries, using the naturally saline water and the burning heat of the midday sun.
Okay, Nick, you see, this lady here is fetching water from the well.
Yeah.
And she has been filling out all these holes.
Right.
So she will fill the last ones, see?
Yep.
That's her day.
And then the water evaporates, leaving this crust of salt.
Right, and then they collect those crusts.
How long before one of these ponds ends up as just salt, do you reckon?
Just one day.
Really?
Yeah.
In just a day,
Yeah.
all that water will evaporate and leave a salt crust?
Yeah.
This place seemed a long way to come just for a drink of salty water, but it pays to keep your animals healthy and well cared for. A nomad's assets, Bubaka told me, are their animals. The goats are their current account, the cattle are their savings account, and the camels are the gold card. Donkeys, he said dismissively, are merely small change. It was time for me to move on, but Bubaka insisted that there was one more thing he wanted to show me. The people we were seeing along the way were mainly Wadabi, as was Bubaka. He said that they were congregating for a festival held every year during this time of plenty at the end of the rainy season, and that it was a party I really should not miss. What should I expect from this festival?
Well, the festival is a Gerewol. Gerewol, it's where the ladies are in charge.
Ladies in charge?
Yeah, they are indeed, and you'll see it. Our traditional cousins say, after God created the cow, he created the woman, and then he created the Fulani.
Okay. So people like you and me are all in with the donkeys and the scorpions and all the rest?
Definitely.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, this. Very kind of him to offer to put us up for the evening. There's a strong and ancient tradition of hospitality amongst nomads, and it wasn't long before Bubaka and I were special guests of Risqua and his family.
Millet grinding. Bonsoir.
Bubaka had said that women were in charge at the Garawal, but they were also still in the kitchen.
He's teasing her whether it's not ready yet. It's still late.
Dinner. Where's my dinner? Yeah, it's the same all over the world.
Yes, it is.
The staple food of many of the desert people is millet, but as nomads they have to acquire this by trading with farmers in the south. This particular flour may have travelled a few hundred kilometres with the Wadabi as they drifted north with the rains. But the Tubu women I hope to join have to make a round trip of 1,600 kilometres to ensure that they get theirs. Risqua and his wife insisted that we borrow their beds that night. Perhaps they felt we were going to need our beauty sleep before the party.
Okay.
Gosh, it's quite a contraption, isn't it?
These things are all lightweight. The whole camp can be folded in 30 minutes, 45 minutes.
Really?
Well, Nick, that's it. 5-star hotel.
Yeah,
This is
absolutely. With the night sky.
it. Right, you can count countless stars tonight.
Yeah. So dinner must be nearly ready now.
With the bedroom seen to, we wandered off to the restaurant. All around us, I could hear the sounds from neighbouring campfires. There was a sense of expectation in the air. Risqua's camel alarm clock ensured that the camp was up bright and early the next morning. After last night's millet porridge sweetened with dates, it was time for me to try the breakfast special, still warm camel's milk. The Garawal is a rare chance for the young Wadabi to get together, a sort of high school prom that can lead to anything from a one-night stand to a lifetime commitment. What makes this festival so unusual, however, is that it's the boys who have to dress to impress, and the girls who get to choose. Physical beauty is very important in Wadabi culture. Men in the West claim bewilderment at the amount of time women take in the bathroom. I soon realised that neither my sisters nor any girlfriend I'd ever known had anything on the Wadabi menfolk preparing for a Gara walk. They started at dawn and took all day. And so it was that I found myself as a sort of special guest in a West African nomad's all-male beauty contest. At about 4 in the afternoon, the party started. Boubacar explained that the songs were like sentimental ballads to impress the ladies, and that showing off the whiteness of your eyes and teeth was the key to success. I was rather pleased with the results of my Wadabi makeover. Boubacar seemed to be reliving his youth. After a considerable amount of effort from us menfolk, the girls finally deigned to honour us with their presence. They'd insisted that I join in the fun, and the village elders seemed to have further plans for honouring their novelty guest. The first girl was having none of it. The second was finally coerced into a grudging recognition of my distinctive mid-latitude charms. Despite everyone's apparent delight at my performance, it was definitely time to leave the young folk to it. The Garawal showed me that gender relations amongst the desert nomads are not always what you'd expect. Though they initially seemed timid, the Wadabi women were obviously not to be messed with. The next stage of my journey depended on me persuading the Tubu women to take me with them across the Tenere. I was hoping this afternoon's charm lesson would stand me in good stead with the toughest nomad women of all. It was time to leave the relative comfort of the Sahel behind and head into the Tenere, to the area they call the Rien de Rien, the nothing of nothing. The Tenere Sand Sea is one of the most desolate and empty places on Earth, and I was heading into the heart of it to find the only people who dare to try and live there. For centuries, Europeans were drawn by the mystery of the Great Sahara. Most never returned to tell of their journeys, broken by its heat, by disease, or dying at the hands of merciless desert people. As we headed for what I hoped would be welcoming Tubu women, we passed clues that further back in its history this had been a less unforgiving environment. Petrified trees lying preserved in the sand were testament to the dramatic oscillations in rainfall and vegetation cover that have occurred here in the last 12,000 years. Rock drawings illustrated that giraffes and rhinos had once grazed this land. After 2 days of driving, I arrived at Termit, home to a small encampment of Tubu. Living this far into the desert is very tough indeed. It's thought that the Tubu here in Termit have developed their survival mechanism over the last half-century. While the men stay behind to tend the animals, the women lead the caravans north across the Tenere to trade their camels for dates, before returning and heading south to trade the dates for the staple millet. The full round trip takes anything up to 6 months. I was hoping to persuade them to take me with them on just a small part of their journey, north to Bilma to get dates. But when I met up with my Tubu translator, Sugi, he had bad news. Well, I've come a long way to meet these legendary Tubu, tough women of the desert, and all I can see around are men. Where are the women?
Oh, they are already left.
They've already left?
Yeah.
When? How many days ago?
Oh, it's about 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And you think we'll be able to catch them up in the vehicle?
Yeah.
Good, because I'm relying on you, Sugi.
No problem. You're welcome.
Thank you.
We knew that the caravan was following the old slave trading route north to the oasis at Bilma, but finding them was like looking for a needle in a haystack amongst the huge dunes. So we decided to head for a well which we knew to be on their way. 36 hot and dusty hours later, we arrived at the oasis of Dibella. My idea of an oasis had always been a cool blue pool surrounded by gently waving palms. Dibella was a little less inviting. Our women weren't there. No one was there. All we could do was wait. The heat was stifling, over 50 degrees Celsius in the sun. It felt like the middle of nowhere, but at least once a day a caravan would appear. Dibella was a sort of Saharan motorway service station. The caravans would water their camels, exchange information, and then melt once more back into the heat and the sand. One day we spotted some women, but they were laden with their dates from Bilma and were heading south. End of the third day of waiting. Sugi says they have to come through here. I don't think there's another well for several days' walk in any direction. But when those people came through earlier today and they left us, there's that feeling of being absolutely in the middle of nowhere and alone. So I hope they arrive tomorrow. Very early the next day, finally, on a far horizon, we spotted a caravan. Was this, at last, our Tubu women? I was nervous but excited. I didn't know what to expect. Huddled in the shade were 4 tiny women, and incredibly 4 children as well. The youngest, little Aisha, was only 6. They weren't the warrior women I'd imagined, but they had just walked 350 kilometers from Termit.
How do you do?
Would they really let me join them?
Could you ask them if it would be possible for me to come on the journey with them to Bilma? They said okay. It seemed they said a bit more than that.
It's not going to be easy for you. Why is she laughing?
How can she tell that just by looking at me? I've got quite good muscles. Look at those. I've walked a long way. Have they ever taken a white person before? No.
They said they used to see the white people coming, but they never had a chance to take someone across the desert.
Well, it wasn't a no, and maybe they were curious to see how an Englishman would do. Sugi had warned me about the Tubu Reserve. If a Tubu woman loves you, he said, even if she's ready to die for you, she'll never show it. While their camels rested, the women set about getting that most vital commodity for desert journeys, water. Dibella is situated on an underground aquifer, though no wells have been sunk here. But all you needed to do to get fresh water was dig. Seeing it ooze from the sand only a metre or so below the surface seemed like a miracle.
Ah, we'll see. It's a bit yellow. Ooh, but fresh. Beautiful. Cool and... Yeah, it's good.
On the eve of heading in to the most remote part of the Sahara, the seriousness of our journey really began to dawn on me. It was 3 days' walk to the next water source. Later that day, Sugi gave me a present for comfort
Sugi.
in the Tenere.
My very own Tubu outfit. Brilliant. Thanks. I must put them on immediately.
It was time, he said, to get properly dressed for the desert. Bonsoir tout le monde. Bonsoir. Is this a better outfit? Yeah? Tubu? Good. Just what I wanted to hear. Now I was dressed for the heat like a local, but the nighttime temperatures in the winter months can drop to freezing. Finding firewood in a barren wasteland is not always easy. The Tubu are experts at recycling. Was there no end to the camel's usefulness? Does the camel dung presumably burns more slowly, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's saying that when you cross, the only wood is this.
Is this, yes. Camels are so efficient at conserving moisture that their dung emerges practically ready for the fire. Tomorrow morning it'd be time to pack up and leave Dibella. Ahead of me lay 5 days of walking across an ocean of sand, accompanied only by 32 camels, Sugi, and a bunch of girls. I'd finally traded in my air-conditioned Jeep for a camel. Ahead of me lay 150 kilometres of the Tenere. If a 6-year-old could do it, I'd certainly have to give it a go. I gave up trying to prove myself after an hour of walking, by which time I was pretty knackered. But I was at the head of the caravan and I looked round and all the women were riding. So I thought, okay, so that I'm getting on as well. Sugi, however, I think wants to walk all the way because he doesn't want to be thought of as a weak guy. So we'll see how long he lasts. The Tenere had been described to me as a land of fear, an uninhabited wasteland, and a place with no life. The days began innocently enough, but by 8 a.m. the heat was already starting to build. We had started at 6 a.m., and after 5 hours the desert was starting to take its toll, and the women called a halt. First 2 hours, quite pleasant. Good temperatures, light breeze, walk in the park. Last 3 hours rather less so. It's very hot and I'm zonked and I'm glad we stopped. In the midday heat, building shade was an urgent priority. Hey presto, instant shade in the desert, huh? Ça va? Ça va. Ça va, Isha? Ça va? Yeah, I'm ça va too. We're all ça va. Okay. Tubu society has strict rules about when and where men and women can mix. Even in the middle of nowhere, it was culturally inappropriate for Sugi to sit in the tent with the women. Luckily, they made an exception for me. Sugi?
Yeah?
Could you ask the women how they think I did this morning?
Yönetini. Mbotani kalentini. They said that you was a very strong guy.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much.
Oh, good, yeah.
This was a great compliment, as they told me it was a difficult and dangerous route. The nomads who crisscross this desolate landscape constantly exchange information, where there might be pasture or which route is best. This camping spot had been chosen because these meagre tufts provided lunch for the camels. How the women navigated in this featureless void was a mystery to me. Without them, I'd have stood no chance at all. Accuracy was crucial. A few hundred meters in the wrong direction could mean missing a waterhole, and in this heat, a day without water means almost certain death. Sugi told me that when they weren't following the tracks of another caravan, the women relied on the sun and the orientation of the dunes. Although the sand is always shifting, the winds of the Tenere are prevailing northeasterlies, and the dunes, therefore, lie along this axis. After dark, of course, they could use the stars which filled the clear Saharan skies.
The mountains are getting closer, Sugi. I don't think they are a mirage.
After 3 days walking, we saw our next destination on the horizon, Zu Baba, an oasis in the middle of the Tenere. As we got closer, the dunes got higher and the sand softer and harder to walk on. Even the camels were struggling.
And it was 2 hours ago that we first saw that mountain.
2 hours of pain, of hunger. 2 hours look like 2 years.
Yeah, yeah, 2 years. But amazingly, I think my camel is more tired than I am.
Yeah, I think.
I've had to be whispering sweet nothings into his ear for the last hour, saying, "Oh, baby, when you get there, that grass is going to taste so sweet and succulent. There'll be more water than you could ever dream of drinking."
I think I was starting to hallucinate in the insane midday heat. Water becomes the holy grail after 3 days of nothing but sand.
Oh, there's a hole in my bucket. Quick, out of the way, you stupid camel. Ow. Yeah, well, I'm trying to do this for you. Not you, you've got some. Out of the way.
Camels first, people second. I was beginning to think like a nomad.
That's heavy. God, when it's full. Oh. This one's for us, Sugi. What do you think? Go ahead. Wash your hands first. Yeah, very, very sensible, Sugi.
A camel can last for 7 days without water, but when it badly wants to drink, it can guzzle 100 litres of water in a matter of minutes.
Go and see some Tubu women, I thought. Bunch of dames with daggers who wander across the sand seas of the Tenere. Oh boy, they are seriously tough. I don't think I've come across anyone who could survive that sort of extreme. And although they've started calling me Tubu, so in a way I guess I'm sort of half man, half Tubu now. Oh, it's taken it out of me to sort of win my spurs in their eyes.
I'd noticed that the women drank very little as we walked. Their secret seemed to lie in the tea, containing fistfuls of sugar, which they made at every opportunity. The settlement of Zu Baba was the remotest inhabited place I'd ever been to. 6 families live here, surrounded by hundreds of square kilometres of nothing but sand. Popping out for a pint of milk is not an option. It's at least a 2-day walk to visit your nearest neighbour. But as I was learning, the people who live in this desert are extremely resourceful. Mr. Chegu was born in Zu Baba and wanted to show us his pride and joy, his garden. It hadn't actually rained in Zu Baba for 3 years, but they still had well water and plenty of camel dung. As a result, he had astonishing beds of tomatoes, melons and aubergines.
I really didn't expect to find a thriving garden in the middle of the Tenerife.
Oh, it's a miracle, as I told you first time.
You were right, Sugi.
Yeah.
A miracle is the appropriate word. It's extraordinary. Beautiful.
I got the feeling that a captive audience was a great novelty here, and they were going to make the most of it. They hadn't had many visiting entertainers either.
Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes, and eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. You were late.
After just one night in Zubaba, we set off once again. We still had 2 long days before we reached Bilma, but I felt we were on the home stretch. The desert, however, had one last surprise in store for me. The wind was starting to pick up. I had a horrible moment's flashback to my time on the roof in Agadez all those weeks before. A sandstorm in the Tenerife. Be careful what you wish for. This is the land of the Harmattan wind, which scoops up tons of desert grime and shovels it out to smother the skies over West Africa. For thousands of kilometers, the atmosphere is filled with this grit from the Sahara. At this stage, I have to confess to having written my PhD thesis on wind-borne particle movement. But by the end of the night, it felt like a field trip too far.
I didn't get a lot of sleep last night because there was a sandstorm. And in a sandstorm, what you don't really want to do is be close to the ground because that's where the major particles are. So you get sandblasted by the biggest bits and it hurts. Still smaller bits available too, of course, to go into every crevice available on the human body. And I do mean everyone. I've got a lot of sand in my eyes. Well, it's not really sand actually, it's dust, it's really fine stuff. Not very nice though. And then it rained hard. So you were getting sandblasted and like in a shower. Well, there we are.
It was a suitably apocalyptic way to end my trip across the Tenerife. But for the women, it was just another dusty day.
My friends, we came at the end of our journey.
I know.
How are you feeling?
Well, I can't quite believe it, actually, Sugi. I mean, here we are. I've never walked across the sand sea before, but I have now. And it's as hard as I'd ever dreamed it was going to be.
Oh.
But we have managed it.
And so, at last, we reached Bilma. It wasn't exactly the bustling oasis fringed with date palms that I'd been expecting. Nevertheless, Sugi and I decided to hit town, to buy a thank you goat, and finally to sample some of Bilma's finest, the famous dates I'd been waiting so long to taste. They don't exactly look very appetizing, do they? Are these fresh, Sugi?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Oh, they taste beautiful.
Sweet.
Mm. They weren't anything like the ones I was used to at Christmas, but these rather unappealing-looking fruits were the reason the Tubu women had come here.
Wow.
Great now. Mrs. très bien, monsieur. We've accomplished our mission.
Okay.
Gates from Vilma. You're right with that, Sugi. I'll grab the gate.
The women had set up camp outside town. They were going to spend a couple of weeks letting the camels recover their condition before bartering them for dates. Okay, all yours. But hold tight, Asha. Instantly better at dealing with goats than I am. The goat seemed to go down rather well, but the dates may have been a slight case of Coles to Newcastle. Despite feeling utterly shattered, I was rather proud of having matched the Tubu step for step across the Tenere. But then it dawned on me that for them this was nothing. Ahead of them lay the return leg to Termit, and hundreds more kilometres to the millet farmers of the south. And after that, the long walk home. And next year, the journey would begin again. I had survived the Rien de Rien, but they were simply existing, doing what generations had done before them. Their constant movement and trade, the lifeblood of this garden of Allah.